guys, welcome back to Chaos Core Tech. My name's Garrett, and today we're going to take a look at how we painted Magnemite. This video is actually part of a series of videos that I've been doing on creating the Magnemite that you see back here. We start out by modeling it and splitting it up for printing, and in the last video we took a look at cleaning up the printed parts, mostly sanding. So if you have not seen those, check the little eye up in the corner. I'll put a link to the playlist so you can watch all of them there. And then this is the final video in the series, and this is where we talk about painting it. This is the step where all of your hard work pays off. We end up with a fully completed print like you see back here. Now, leaving off last time, we had the object fully assembled, pretty much put together, primed up, and all of the rough spots taken care of. So at this point, it is completely ready for the paint. Now, when it comes to painting these models, my wife usually utilizes 3 different techniques for applying paint to these things: spray painting, airbrush painting, and painting with brushes. Now, you've likely seen some variation of these different things, and actually for Magnemite we did not use the spray painting technique. Although it is basically the same thing as priming in terms of actually applying the paint, where you just kind of go over it in light coats and you can apply multiple coats until you get the desired finish. And you'd mostly be using that technique to change the color of an entire object. You're not going to be painting small details with a spray paint can. It is mostly for fast coverage of a large object. So for example, it would be the grays on the body of Magnemite, because that has the most surface area, and you would just cover the entire thing. But for this, we actually opted for an airbrush. And I wouldn't really say that there's many advantages or disadvantages to using spray paint versus an airbrush. It's kind of just your personal taste. I think the airbrush leaves kind of a nice finish on it, and that's ultimately why we went with this one. It was just that I liked how the finish looked a little bit better. And you can actually mix paints with an airbrush, which my wife is really good at mixing paints to get the color she wants. With spray paint, you pretty much just have to find that color. Now, when it comes to using an airbrush, it can be kind of an art in itself. The idea is simple, the execution is pretty simple, but actually maintaining the airbrush and making sure that you use it properly can be kind of a big deal. So I'm going to put a link down in the description to a video that kind of shows how to use an airbrush and some common things to look out for. And they'll go into a lot more detail, but I'll gloss over how we used it quickly here. I will also put a link to the airbrush that we use down there, as well as the airbrush paints that we use. So basically what we did is took the airbrush, my wife mixed together the paint she wanted, and basically did that by pouring paints together. To use an airbrush, you need a very, very liquefied paint, so it'll be a very similar consistency to water. And she just mixed that up in the top of the airbrush. Then you use the same technique as priming. You start off of the model, apply a little bit of pressure so the paint is spraying out, and then move across the model. And actually you'll want to release in between, because the air compressor can actually overheat and you don't want to run it constantly. So make a pass, let up, make another pass, let up, and just continue that until you have the entire object covered. Well, that sounds pretty simple, and you'd be right. But as I said, there's a lot more that goes into it. And if you're curious about using an airbrush, I would definitely recommend trying it. They can be slightly expensive. They're really not that bad. But especially if you are finishing a lot of things like this, I think that most people would find an airbrush to be a very welcome option. Also, I want to briefly talk about masking. Now, you probably noticed in the clips that I just showed that there is some tape around some of these models. And part of that is because I was an idiot when I designed it to begin with, and I made the magnets attach to the body on the inside so they could freely rotate, but they can't attach after the body's already put together. So that means that you have to paint it whole, and you can't paint those pieces separately. And if you look at Magnemite right back here, you can see that the magnets are a slightly different shade of gray than the main body, and that's kind of problematic. You want to take some masking tape, and we actually took some saran wrap too, to wrap around the model and then put the masking tape around that, just because we've had some instances where the masking tape does pull up some of the tape underneath, but your mileage may vary with that. So we focused on the area that we knew we were going to paint. We had the main body painted already, and then we wrapped that part in saran wrap around the magnet and then put tape around it, basically blocking off any area close to the magnet. And that's just in case while you're painting the magnet that some splashes up and sprays on the main body, which will happen. That just ensures that it paints the tape, not the body, and you can just take the tape off and you'll have a perfectly finished object like this. So masking tape is your friend. So now you should have your Magnemite pretty much fully colored, except for the smaller details. And for those smaller details, we're going to be moving to the paintbrush technique. And really, there's no fancy techniques here. It is just good old-fashioned painting like you did when you were a kid in school. I do have a couple of tips that might help you along the way. And just a reminder, you can really do whatever you want here. I'm just saying what we specifically did. So I'll just start from the bottom. We use acrylic paint, water-based acrylic paint. And this is really nice because if you find that the paint is too thick, then you can just add some water to it and it thins it out. And you'll be able to tell if your paint is too thick if you're getting like really big brush strokes and it's just generally globbing in certain areas, then your paint might be a little bit too thick. And as for paintbrushes, there's two main types of paintbrushes. The first is the natural type of paintbrush that I think it's hair, they have bristles on it. And the second, I believe these are called synthetic paintbrushes. I'll put it in the description so you can see what I'm actually talking about. But the tips on these paintbrushes are white. And my wife has found that she prefers these because they last a little bit longer without the bristles kind of fraying out. And just generally she's able to get a more crisp line when she's painting in small details. And if this is your first time buying paintbrushes, buy a good range of sizes because obviously a big paintbrush is good for applying a lot of paint to a certain area, but small paintbrushes are better for getting into tighter details. Now, luckily Magnemite is pretty easy going here. There's only a few things here and they have clear boundaries since we took care to do that in the model. And as a general rule when painting things, you'll want to try to go light to dark because if you paint something light on there, you can paint something dark over it pretty easily. But if you have something dark on there, say a black, you're not going to be able to paint white or light colors over that as easily, and it can really put you in a bad situation. So with Magnemite, what we're going to do is start with the whites of the eye, and basically just paint that in. The center of the circle is really easy. Just don't glob up the paint. Try not to leave any brush strokes. And just go over it several times to get it completely coated. Now when you're going around the edge of the circle of the eye, pick a smaller brush. An angled brush can actually really help here. And just take your time, go slow, light touch, and just get that outside coated. And you might want to keep a damp paper towel or use your finger or something like that. If you happen to smudge outside the line, if you're quick enough, you can get in there and clean it up without leaving any residue. And make sure to let that white completely dry and move on to the black of the eye. And again, this is very simple. Pick a decently small brush, get some black paint, and just paint it in. And then repeat that process for the red and the blue on the outside of the magnet. That's really all there is to it. And for someone who's never really done this type of thing, I was one of those people going into this project, it can be pretty intimidating, but actually running through this process one full time made me a lot more confident. And I don't have the steadiest of hand while painting, but I know that that would improve with time. So if you're doing something like this, wanting to get good, just keep doing it. That is the biggest thing here. Just keep painting, you'll get better and better, and before you know it, you'll be able to paint just about anything you want. Now, a lot of people ask me and my wife what paints we use. And as I said, the airbrush paints, there will be a link down in the description because we do use a very specific one for that. But with paintbrush paints, pretty much any acrylic paint that you can get at your local hobby store will do just fine in this situation. You may find ones that you prefer. My wife actually found that she prefers the paints that are already kind of watered down because some of them come very thick and you have to water them down yourself. She prefers the ones that are pre-watered down. But just try out different paints. Now, I get a lot of questions asking what specific colors she used on a model, and I'm afraid I can't help you out with those ones. She's always been very artistic. She did a ton of art in high school. She was a hairdresser, and now she decorates amazing cakes for a living. So mixing colors has always been in her life, and she is amazing at it. And she doesn't really take direct measurements to try and get proportions right. She just eyeballs it and keeps adding in different colors until the color is what she wants. So I apologize, you're pretty much on your own on that one. But just keep experimenting. The worst that can happen is you waste some paint. Now there's one last thing that we do. With most of these models, we apply some sort of coat to finish it. And now this serves a couple of purposes. One, it protects the paint job in case you bump it into something, or just from the air, paint will sometimes start to flake. This will just help seal everything in. And it can also provide a nice effect on the finish. Like you can get a glossy clear coat that will make the object shine and reflect light a little bit better. And then you can also get a matte coat, which will not make it any shinier, but sometimes it can give a very nice looking finish. And I will put links to those down in the description as well. They come in spray paint cans, and it's the same technique for applying it. Okay guys, well that completely closes out our Magnemite Creation series. I really hope this was helpful for you. It was definitely an eye-opening experience for me, and I think I've started to look at models a little bit differently, kind of knowing what goes into it, and I definitely plan to do more of this type thing in the future. So I will be painting more models, some more complex models, and as I get better at that and feel like I can comfortably communicate that to you, I will bring you those types of videos as well. So let me know in the comments if there was anything in this entire process that you think I didn't explain very well or that you would like me to elaborate on, because I will totally do that. Then once again, check the description for all of those links, and a huge shout out to my wife, that she paints all of these things and does an amazing job. Without her, I genuinely think this channel would still be struggling to get off of its feet. So I owe a ton to her, and she devotes a lot of her time to making these things look the way they do. So if you have time, check the description. I will put a link to her Twitter down there, and I'll put her handle right here on the screen. Go tweet her and just say thanks and give her a nice comment about how well she does on all these. I think that would make her happy. Okay guys, well thank you for sticking with me this entire time. I really hope it was helpful, and I will see you next time.